"Someone do something! For God's sake, it's my son!" shouted Richard the millionaire, his voice cracking, his face red, and his hands shaking as he looked around, begging for help. Fifth Avenue skyscraper. The avenue reflected light from every surface. Crystal chandeliers, lined silverware, mirrored walls. Richard Miller. S name was on everyone's lips, and he knew it. Richard was the kind of man who occupied a space before he even entered. Tailored suit, practiced smile, watch that cost many people's annual salary. He walked between the tables as if inspecting an investment. It wasn't a party, it was a stage. "Lights a little warmer, please," he said, without looking at the technician. "I want the photos to look cozy. Cozy sells." The aide hurried on. "Of course, Mr. Miller." Richard ran a hand through his impeccable hair, checked the schedule. "Where's the senator and the Westbrook investors? Table, fund. Are you in the front row?" "Yes, sir. Everything as requested." He nodded, satisfied. His routine was like this. Calls at 5 a.m., rush at 6 a.m., meetings until lunch, cold decisions until late afternoon, and at night, public relations, image perfect, nothing out of place, nothing out of control. Grace, his wife, moved as if floating, elegant dress, discreet jewelry that screamed expensive. She held a glass of champagne just to compose the photo. "Richard, the press will want a picture of us with the senator. No sweat on your brow, please." She smiled, checking her reflection in the mirror. "I've already arranged it, Grace," he replied automatically, "and asked the photographer for a high angle. No one needs to see the table in the back." Grace nodded, more concerned with her own makeup than anything else. Beside her, 8-year-old Liam ran between the chairs, pretending the columns were goalposts. "Mommy, look at this." He kicked the air, laughing. "Liam, not now," Grace said, without taking her eyes off her phone. "Keep the tablet, honey." "But I want to play." "Later, sit down, please." Richard noticed his son at a glance, like someone checking a chart and then returning to the report. "Get those balls of paper off the floor," he ordered a waiter, "and someone keep the boy near the head table." The waiter murmured a, "Yes, sir." Around them, waiters glided like shadows. Among them, Maria, the maid, silent and swift, collected napkins, straightened glasses, and replaced crooked silverware. Her hair was tied in a simple bun, her hands scarred from work, and her gaze attentive, catching what no one else saw. She'd arrived at 5 in the morning, coming from a cramped apartment in Queens, after 2 transfers. In the kitchen, she'd already left the trays counted. That was how she avoided harsh remarks from the boss. Everything planned, everything noted. "Maria, the glasses on table 3 are a millimeter out of alignment." The maitre d' exaggeratedly nudged. "I'll fix it right away, sir," he replied immediately, with the calm of someone who hears this every day. She wiped the microfiber cloth over it, making the crystal sing softly. She liked that sound. It was the only compliment the evening had for her. Liam appeared beside her, curious. "You make music with the glass?" Maria smiled, her teeth barely showing. "Just a trick. Wanna see?" She did it again, a thin sound that seemed to tickle the air. The boy laughed. "Cool. Go with your mom, champ. The speeches are about to start." "Nobody likes speeches." "Sometimes we need to listen a little before we speak," she said, blinking. "Yeah, my dad talks a lot." "Your dad talks to a lot of people. It must be heavy carrying so many words." Liam thought for a second, then ran off again. Across the room, Richard was adjusting his microphone. "Everyone, 15 minutes and I'll be up," he told his team. "The senator first, me last, and bring the medium-rare Wagyu to the main table. No mistakes today." The chef nodded, sweating. "Yes, sir, perfect." Richard checked his watch, breathing, controlling his posture, everything calculated. No improvisation. Grace posed for a photo. "How's my hair?" "Perfect," her friend said. "This jewel, divine. A gift from Richard. He knows image is everything." "And Liam!" Grace glanced quickly around the room. He's around. The babysitter had a problem. He's staying with us today, just today. Maria continued her circuit, almost invisible. She was careful not to bump into anyone, not to attract attention. She had learned to exist in silence. In the kitchen, she had a small bottle of water with her name written in pen. In her pocket, a bandage and an extra hair tie. In her mind, a list. Replace napkins for table 5, check ice, discreetly collect empty plates, keep an eye on the running boy. Maria, the maitre d', called again. Are trays ready? Ready. Yes. The cold canapes have 2 more because the investor's table always asks for seconds. He looked at her, surprised by her advance. Right. Good job. She simply nodded and continued. Liam came back, this time panting. Did you see that huge cake? It has chocolate on top. Yes, I did. But first dinner, then dessert. That's the rule for big events, Maria said conspiratorially. Would you like a glass of water? Yes. She poured a small glass, kneeling down to his level. Slowly. We enjoy it more when we're not in a hurry. My dad always rushes. So today, you can be the different one. From the stage, the master of ceremonies tested the sound. Test sound 1, 2. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. The guests settled in, elegant laughter, silverware clinking. The New York skyline streamed in through the windows, a sea of lights as far as the eye could see. Richard, at the center of it all, lifted his chin. It's today, he said to himself, as if sealing a contract. Today all doors open. He didn't notice, but a few steps away, a woman in a blue uniform discreetly arranged a chair so an elderly woman could sit without tripping. She didn't ask for applause. She didn't earn a smile. She simply did what she always does, prevent small disasters from happening. Maria picked up a napkin from the floor, looked around, and for a moment felt the air grow heavy, as if the room were breathing heavily. A matter of seconds, she shook her head and returned to her work. In the distance, Liam laughed to himself, spinning between the tables like a top. Grace adjusted her bracelet. Richard shrugged. Their world shone. Hers held its glow. The lights dimmed slightly. The master of ceremonies announced the main course. Waiters glided past with silver trays, the aroma of medium-rare meat wafting through the room. Richard, at the center table, gave a practiced smile. Cameras, flashes, laughter, everything was perfect. Liam returned to his chair after twirling between tables. A waiter placed a plate in front of him with small cubes of tender meat, colorful vegetables, and smooth mashed potatoes. Can I eat now?" he whispered to his mother. "Yes, now," Grace replied, without taking her eyes off the photographer. But slowly, Liam... From the stage, the master of ceremonies tapped the microphone lightly. "Ladies and gentlemen, a toast to tonight's host, Mr. Richard Miller." Applause, glasses clinking. Richard raised his proudly. The camera zoomed in to capture the perfect angle. Liam, starving, took a larger-than-expected bite into his mouth. He bit down quickly, as if competing with time. He swallowed without chewing properly. The bite went down crookedly. Suddenly, he stopped. The boy's hands went to his throat, his eyes wide. He tried to cough. No sound came out. 1, 2 attempts. Silence. The fork fell and hit the plate with a sharp crunch. Grace's smile froze on her face. "Liam!" Her voice came thin, almost breathless. At the table behind them, 2 ladies continued talking, oblivious. But the waiter next to them saw the change in the boy's gaze. He saw his face begin to lose color. His neck stiffened. Liam gasped for air. "Nothing." "Son?" Grace repeated, her hand shaking now. "Liam, talk to me." Richard, still standing with his glass, looked at his son as if he didn't understand the scene. It took him a full second to connect the dots. The previously noisy room seemed to lose half its sounds. The massive clock on the wall marked the next minute with a tick that pierced the air. Liam pushed back his chair, his eyes welling up. He tried to suck in air, but his lips only trembled. A first hint of panic appeared in his actions. He accidentally kicked the base of the table, and the glass of water toppled over, sending a puddle pattern across the white linen. What happened? Richard slowly lowered his glass. Liam, the boy, didn't answer. His hands clutched his throat as if they could open a path. His face began to take on a bluish hue around the edges of his lips. Maria was 3 tables away, lining up the cutlery. The clink of the fork on the plate, the silence of a cough that wouldn't come, the strange movement of the boy's shoulders, all of it reached her like a warning. Her body recognized it before her head. "No," she whispered, feeling her heart race. Grace jumped up, her chair scraping against the floor. "Liam, breathe, honey, breathe." She patted his back, unsure of how, weakly, without technique. He leaned forward, gasping, but no air came. "Someone call a doctor," a guest said, terrified but without moving. "Is he choking?" asked a man, already with his hand in his pocket for his cell phone. "I think so," replied another, equally lost. Richard walked around the table, his face turning red as quickly as his son's was turning purple. He touched Liam's shoulder. "Stay with me, champ. Look at me." The words came out broken, his composure slipping away through an invisible crack. The master of ceremonies, uncomprehending, looked at the band. The music faded to silence. The glow of the lights seemed harsh, cold. Some people stood. Others put their hands to their mouths. No one touched their cymbals. No one knew exactly what to do. "Water," someone suggested. "No," another replied, uncertainly. "Wait, or lift his arms." Liam tried to take another breath. A sharp, short noise came from him, like a whistling sound that died away at first. Then nothing. The desperation in the boy's eyes was a mirror no one wanted to look into. He was there, in the center of an ocean of people and crystals, and he seemed alone. Maria took a step forward. She stopped. Her heart was pounding so hard it hurt. She saw Grace's hands trembling rhythmlessly, her fingers aimlessly. She saw Richard looking around, as if he could buy an answer. She saw the boy growing heavier, his body hunching over. "It can't happen again," flashed through her mind, a memory that burned like someone had opened a window in the past. Not now, not here. Someone. "For God's sake." Richard's voice cracked, finally raw. "Someone do something!" The people around them began to move, but in meaningless circles. A woman searched for the emergency number, her hand trembling over the screen. A man said, calm down," repeating the word as if it could turn into air. Liam brought his hands to his chest. His face now had a light purple hue around his mouth. The world around him shrank, like when you put your head under water and only hear your own heartbeat. Maria felt her legs walk on their own. The microfiber cloth slipped from her hand. The crystal stopped singing. Richard cupped his son's face gently, as if the touch could bring oxygen. "Stay with me, son. Look at me," he whispered, a plea that bounced off the void. The entire room held its breath. Between the chandeliers and ties, there wasn't enough air for an 8-year-old boy. "Call an ambulance!" someone yelled. "And what's the number again?" Someone else stammered. 911, a third replied, trying to dial and missing. Liam couldn't draw in air. His eyes cried out for help. His hands clutched his throat as if they could open an invisible path. The skin around his lips was turning purple. The noise in the room seemed distant, as if he were inside a glass case. Richard dropped the glass. The crystal exploded with a crack that echoed across the room. "Do something! He's going to die!" The scream came out in a ragged voice, without poise, without power, just fear. 2 guests approached, unsure what to do. One tried to lift Liam's arms, another patted the boy's back in a haphazard, weak and awkward way. "Lift his chin, maybe it'll help. Give him water." "Don't give him water." Another replied, uncertain. "Wait, I saw it on a video. Grace brought her hand to her mouth, white as the towel. Liam, my God. Her gaze went blank for a second, her body slackened, the glass slipping from her fingers. Richard. Grace. Richard tried to hold her, but she was already giving in, her body falling backward. Two waiters rushed over and caught her before she hit the floor. "Bring sugar! A cold washcloth!" someone ordered, unsure if that was causing her to faint or guilt. Maria was already a few steps away. Her heart was pounding in her throat. She saw the set of Liam's shoulders, his unsteady chest, the tentative coughs that died before they could be born. She recognized that silence. "Excuse me," she said cautiously. Approaching, before she could reach him, the maître d' stepped in front of him, arms outstretched like a barrier. "Maria, no, stay where you are." "He's out of breath," she replied, her voice firm. "I can help. That's for doctors. Don't make trouble," she whispered through gritted teeth, more concerned with etiquette than with the boy. A man in a dark suit, one of the investors, gave him a sideways look. "What's a maid doing here? She'll get in the way." "Sir, please," Maria insisted, turning away from him. "He needs help now." Another guest, fiddling with his expensive watch as if it offered answers, pointed a finger at her. "Move it. If something goes wrong, who's responsible?" "He doesn't have time," Maria said, stepping forward. "Don't touch my grandson," shouted a woman, not even knowing who Maria was. Richard was bent over his son, eyes burning and watery. "Liam, look at me, son. Look at me. Breathe, breathe." He lifted his head, searching for a saving authority. "Is there a doctor here?" His voice trailed off. "Doctor!" A man raised his hand in the back. "I'm a cardiologist." "Then come on." The doctor rushed dead. "He's choking. We need, fro," like someone who'd forgotten the steps to a song in the middle of the stage. Maria, and again the barrier, the maître d'. "Move, block." "Maria, you don't understand." "I understand." A photographer, still holding his camera, whispered to his colleague, "This is going to be in all the newspapers. Tycoon's son passes out at gala dinner." "Keep your voice down," Grace's friend interrupted, holding the fainted woman's hand. "Help instead of commenting." Liam gasped for air again, and again found nothing. A tear slipped from the corner of his eye and mixed with the cold sweat on his forehead. His little hand clutched his father's sleeve, a plea that hurt more than any scream. "Ambulance on the way," someone announced with the phone to their ear. "How long?" Richard whipped around. 5, 7 minutes. "I don't know." 7 minutes. He laughed humorlessly, a broken laugh. "My son doesn't have 7 minutes." An older man, trying to help, put his hands on Liam's shoulders and shook gently. "Go ahead, kid, go ahead. Don't shake." A woman intervened, startled. "It could get worse. I think. I don't know." Maria took a deep breath. The entire room weighed down on her. The stares that said, "This isn't your place." The blue uniform that screamed, "Stay invisible." The human wall between her and the boy. The sound of a glass falling spread. It was as if the room was breathing in sobs. "Mr. Miller," she tried, now speaking directly to Richard, over the maître d''s shoulder. "He needs a maneuver now." Richard looked at her as if spotting an island in the middle of a shipwreck, but unsure if he can step on it. "Do you know what to do?" The question came out small, raspy. "I know. No." The investor cut in, raising his voice. "This is crazy. If something happens, you're fired, and the house is sued." "Sue later," Richard snapped, his control slipping. "My son is purple." The cardiologist, sweating, raised his hands. I can advise. It's just, I haven't done this in years." "Then tell me," the maître d' replied, nervous, but still blocking Maria. "Tell me what to do." Grace, regaining consciousness in the waiters and lap, opened her eyes and found the scene. Her son contorted, her husband in tatters, the maid standing half-step, hampered. "Richard," her voice barely came out. "Oh, let her. Some guests began to whisper, cruelty arising where courage was lacking. Now even the maid wants to be a heroine. She's making a scene. This is no place for her. Maria felt shame rise hotly to her face, but she didn't back away. It hurt, but less than the thought of the boy gasping for air. She looked over the maître de sas's shoulder, calculated the distance, imagined the position of his hands, the exact spot below his sternum. Her body knew the path her mind tried to deny. "Move out of the way," he asked, for the last time, his voice no longer trembling. "Please." She put one leg between his feet to steady him. She bent him slightly forward, a safe angle. She reached behind him and cupped her hand in a fist just above his navel, just right, her other hand wrapping around it. She took a tiny breath. The entire room held its breath. "Liam, trust me. It will be quick." First thrust, inward and upward, dry, resolute. The boy's body shook. Nothing came out. A murmur ran around the tables. "My God! It's going to hurt!" "Stop it!" Again, Maria didn't tremble. Second thrust, inward and upward. The sound that came was a broken whistle. Richard's face tightened, his hand on his son's shoulder. "Son, stay with me." One more. Maria's voice was the only non-panic sound in the room. Third thrust, firm, enough to move the trapped air like a battering ram. Liam's eyes watered. A short cough appeared. The first, "That's it," Maria whispered. "Come on, air." "You're going to break a rib," someone said, distressed. "She's going to kill the boy," the investor insisted, pale. "Shut up," Richard exploded, without taking his eyes off his son. Fourth thrust, stronger, more precise, the movement trained in the flesh of memory. Liam's body doubled over slightly, a wet, choked noise. Fifth impulse. The piece of meat flew, dark and glistening, hitting the plate with a thud that sounded like thunder. A perfect circle of silence opened around it. For a microsecond, no one breathed, not the room, not the city. And then, air. Liam sucked in a hard, clumsy gasp of oxygen that came with a deep, thick, liberating cough. His shoulders slumped a little. His chest rose and fell. Again. Again. The color of his skin began to return like the slow dawn. His eyes, watery, searched for his father. Father, he managed hoarsely. Richard collapsed to his knees, hugging his son carefully, as if he were glass. A tearful laugh escaped, ugly and beautiful at the same time. I'm here, my champion. Breathe. That's it. Breathe." Grace, still supported by the waiters, brought her hands to her face and let out a loud sob, her lipstick smearing in a red line. "Liam, my baby." Maria kept her body between the boy and the rest of the world for another second. She checked with her eyes that there was nothing left in her mouth. She patted his back twice, just to make sure the air was now traveling the right way. Her voice, when it returned, was sweet and low, slowly. "Breathe in through your nose, breathe out through your mouth. That's it, you're okay." No one applauded, not right away. What came first was shock. The maitre d', his hand still in the air from the prohibition gesture, looked like a statue out of place. The cardiologist wiped the sweat from his forehead, unsure where to place his hands. The lady who had told Maria not to touch stood with her lips parted, searching for words that didn't exist. The investor, the same one who had shouted, "Stay away," lowered his eyes when Maria's gaze reached him. He took his hand out of his pocket, as if returning a judgment. One of the photographers lowered his camera. He realized there were things you can't photograph, you can only respect. Is he okay?" a guest asked, afraid of the answer. "He will be," Maria said simply, as if handing a glass of water. "His throat might hurt." "Coughing is normal now." Richard lifted his head, tears glistening under the chandeliers. He found Maria. For a second, there was no money, no etiquette, no hierarchy, just life. "You," his voice trailed off. "You saved my son. Maria nodded with an almost imperceptible movement. She straightened her uniform, picked up the fallen glass, and removed the soaked napkin from in front of Liam. Her hands returned to work, as if knowing that when the world collapses, someone has to sweep the floor. A murmur passed through the room, changed. It was no longer panic. It was the sound of a collective thought. What if it wasn't her? The eyes, once from above, were now facing forward, some even from below. The band, unsure of what to do, fell silent. The master of ceremonies opened his mouth, closed it and opened it again. He couldn't find the lyrics for that scene. A waiter, the same one who had stopped Maria earlier, took a timid step. "Thank you," came out, small but genuine. Liam, still hugging his father, looked up at her. "It hurt," he confessed in a whisper. "Pain that saves," Maria replied with a tired smile. "I know." She took a half-step back, giving the family space. Reflexively, she reached for the fallen microfiber cloth. She picked it up from the floor, as if regaining her own invisibility, but the silence around her was no longer the same. The crystal had stopped singing, and yet everyone heard the music. Richard gripped his son's hand with new strength. Grace, trembling, touched Maria's shoulder and bit back a sorry that wouldn't come out. The maître d' straightened his tie, not daring to look directly at him. ChatGPT said the hall was still breathing with sobs when Maria stepped back, trying to disappear back into her blue uniform. But Richard, on his knees, holding his son's hand, looked up at her. There was a wordless gratitude there, mixed with a fear that hadn't yet gone away. How exactly did you know?" He tried, but his voice broke. Maria took a moment to respond. The microfiber cloth was wet in her hand. She glanced at Liam, who was now breathing more calmly, still gasping between coughs. Her eyes lit up. When she opened her mouth, her voice came out small, but clear. "I learned this the hard way." She took a deep breath. "My son choked to death when he was his age. I promised myself I'd never sit still again." The silence changed color. Those nearby felt a shiver run through the tables. Grace put her hand to her chest, as if a string had been pulled from within. "I'm sorry," she whispered almost soundlessly. Maria nodded, as if accepting a flower left at the door. She looked at the marble floor that reflected everything, and she spoke, unhurriedly, like someone slowly opening a window. It was a Sunday, after church, a ham sandwich. He laughed, ran around the room, and suddenly stopped. I patted his back, gave him water, did everything wrong. No one told me how it was. It took them a long time to get there. Too long. He swallowed. I discovered late that there are steps, that there is a way, and that I needed to know. Maria's fingers automatically smoothed the hem of her apron. She continued. The next week, I looked for a course at the neighborhood community center, Heimlich, CPR, first aid. I did them all. I repeated them. I never wanted to stand around without knowing what to do again. Her eyes welled up. Since then, I've been observing. I go places and I observe. A guest, who had been whispering before, lowered her head. The maître d', motionless, felt his tie tighten. The cardiologist took a deep breath, punished by silent shame. When I saw Liam, Maria said, turning to the boy, I recognized the stiff shoulder, the cough that wouldn't come. The body, it speaks. We just have to listen. She offered a half smile. And I listened. Liam squeezed his father's hand and looked at her with that new respect children have when they truly understand courage. It hurt, but it's gone, he said shyly. Quick pain is better than shortness of breath, Maria replied softly. It'll be a bad memory for a few days, but it'll pass, and you'll play again. Just chew slowly, okay? Deal. Richard placed his hand on his son's shoulder and, after 2 seconds of hesitation, spoke directly to Maria, without any masks. I had no idea, he said quietly. Forgive me for everything I didn't see, for everything I didn't want to see. You don't need to apologize, she replied sincerely. Just seeing him breathing is enough. Grace took a step closer, still pale. Her jewelry didn't shine as brightly in the light. Her eyes were wet, her makeup no longer a concern. I was hard on you today, on everyone, she swallowed. You saved my son, and I'm sorry about yours. I really am. Maria nodded again. There was no posing there. Just two mothers, for a second, on ground neither of them would choose to tread. When my son died, I kept this, Maria said, pulling a laminated card, worn at the edges, from her wallet. It's a reminder. She showed it. Simple, printed instructions on choking and CPR. On the back, an emergency number and 3 steps drawn. I keep it with me. Always. I already know it by heart. But I keep it with me. The cardiologist approached, humbly, without the lab coat that gave him courage. I wanted to say that you acted perfectly. He searched for the words. In practice, in the moment, many of us freeze. You didn't freeze. I had nowhere else to go, she replied. There was no turning back. A young waiter, the one who had stopped her before, cleared his throat, embarrassed. I tried to stop you. I thought, he interrupted, unable to find a way out. I'm sorry. Maria placed her hand lightly on his arm. You did what you thought was right. Today you learned. I learned the hard way too, he breathed. We can teach others. That's how pain is worth something. The guests began to create space around them, less curious, more human. Someone brought Maria a glass of water. Another placed a chair nearby, in case she wanted to sit. She declined with a small gesture. I'm fine, she said. Just, a little reminiscing. Richard looked around the room, and for the first time that night, the place seemed different. Fewer displays, more people. He knelt, picked up the piece of meat from the plate with a napkin, like someone picking up a defeated enemy, and discreetly placed it on a tray. I spend hours controlling everything, he confessed, more to himself than to others. And in the 1 minute that mattered, I didn't know what to do. He turned to Maria. You knew. Maria took her first unhurried breath since the tray fell. There was a sad peace on her face, the kind that comes after a storm. I just did what I wished I had done before, he said. This time God gave me the seconds I needed. Grace held Liam's hand. The boy took a half step closer to Maria, still shy, still afraid of his own body. Thank you, he said. You're welcome, champ. All around, a low murmur transformed into another kind of silence, one that doesn't weigh down, one that welcomes. People who had only seen uniforms began to see the person. And suddenly, the blue uniform was no longer invisible. It was a color in the middle of the bright room, a color that held life in place. Maria put the laminated card back in her wallet. Her heart was still beating fast, but now there was room for air to catch its breath. She adjusted her bun, discreetly wiped her eyes, and straightened her posture, as if pulling herself back on her axis. And if he coughs harder in the next few hours, that's normal, she explained matter-of-factly. If he has chest pain, applying ice on the outside helps, and water, now, just little by little. She paused. And if you want, I can show you the steps later. It's simple. You just need to learn. The phrase hung in the air like a no-pressure invitation. People nodded. Others bit their lips, regretting not knowing. Richard nodded slowly, his eyes still moist. I want to learn. Maria smiled slightly, like someone opening a door without making a sound. So start with 1. Chew slowly. Liam laughed, weakly, but he laughed. And that sound was the first that didn't hurt. ChatGPT said. The murmur of the room subsided to a whisper. Richard still held Liam's hand, as if the world might steal his breath at any moment. Then, carefully, he stood. He walked toward Maria slowly, as if crossing a narrow bridge over a chasm. He stopped before her and, without looking to either side, took the maid's hands in both, firm and trembling at the same time. You saved my son, the voice came hoarse. I owe you his life. Maria tried to pull her hands away shyly, but he didn't let her. I just did what I had to do, he replied quietly. No, Richard shook his head, his eyes still moist. You did what no one here could. Not me. Not the doctors. Not my important guests. He took a deep breath, as if deciding something. Please, don't work serving glasses anymore. I want you by my family's side. Maria blinked, not understanding at first. I don't understand. I want you to be Liam's tutor, she said clearly, word for word. Not just for studies, for life, discipline, respect, calm. He needs someone who sees what we don't. And I saw today that you see. The maître d' swallowed. A waiter stopped in mid-step. A few people looked at each other in shock. Grace approached cautiously. She looked Maria in the eyes, unvarnished, unposed. I support it, she said sincerely. If you accept, I'll thank you every day. Maria clutched the microfiber cloth in her hands, as if searching for a haven. The idea hit her hard. It was beautiful. It was big. It was frightening. Mr. Miller, she began hesitantly. I work by the hour. I have another job in the morning, and I live far away. I don't know if we'll figure it all out, Richard said, without arrogance, just urgency. Schedule, salary, transportation, respect, he repeated, like a commitment. You won't lose anything, you'll gain, and so will we. Liam tugged at his father's sleeve and looked at Maria with a toothless smile. I want to, he said simply. You speak calmly. When I was scared, you didn't scream. I like that. Maria bit her lip to hold back her emotion. She looked at the boy, then at Grace, then at the man who, just hours before, had seemed made of marble. Now he was a father. She breathed, searching for the axis. I can try for a month, she held up a finger. If it works for him, we'll continue. If I mess up, I'll go back to the glasses without scolding. Richard almost smiled for the first time that night. Good deal, 1 month. He extended his hand, formal but with a new shine. With a contract, everything clear, and with my word. Maria shook his hand. It was short and respectful. Like an old agreement, Grace lightly touched Maria's arm. I want to learn too, she said sincerely, about first aid and about listening more. If you're up for it, can you teach me? Love teaching, Maria replied, giving a smile she hadn't had before. And it's simple, you know. The hard part is remembering it at the time. Richard looked around. The tables seemed smaller. The stage seemed irrelevant. He called the maître d', his voice calm now. Bring water and a plate of cut-up fruit for my son. He paused. And arrange a private room for us after dinner. I want to talk to Mrs. Maria about our new routine. The maître d' nodded, blushing, his head lowered. Yes, Mr. Miller. Yes, Mrs. Maria. Donna Maria. The treatment felt different. Maria adjusted her bun, trying not to laugh nervously. I'm still just Maria, she said gently, and I'll continue to help in whatever way I can. Now you're part of it, Richard retorted, and whoever is part of it has a voice. Liam raised his hand, just like in school. If Maria is going to be my guardian, can I chew 5 times before swallowing? He asked seriously. 10, Maria corrected, laughing. And water between bites. Done. Richard looked at Maria again, calmer. Thank you, he repeated softly, as if he needed gratitude to become a habit in his mouth. Today you saved my son. Tomorrow, with your help, I want to save what we can't see inside. Maria nodded, deep in her chest. Something settled. It wasn't just a job. It was a place. So let's start from the beginning, she said. Simple rules at the table. Routine for Liam. And dry if you want. I'll bring course brochures to the community center tomorrow morning. We can do a quick team workout. I want everyone, Richard replied decisively. From the security guard to the chef. Grace took a deep breath of relief. She touched her son's shoulder, then Maria's. Thank you for giving us A second chance. Maria smiled. The room seemed brighter, not because of the lights, but because someone had finally turned on what mattered. The next morning, the Miller house seemed to breathe differently. On the breakfast table were cut-up fruit, fresh bread, and a handwritten note. Rule 1. Chew slowly. Rule 2. Drink water between bites. Maria. Liam read it aloud and smiled. 10 bites, right? He asked, already counting on his fingers. 10, champ, Maria confirmed. Today we start our routine. Richard leafed through the newspaper without really seeing the letters. He was aware of the way his son looked at Maria with curiosity and respect. Grace appeared, still in her robe, her hair loose. She stood in the doorway, watching as if unsure if she was welcome. Can I stay? He asked softly. Of course, Maria said naturally. Let's start with organization, study and gratitude. On the whiteboard he'd brought from the community center, he wrote in a firm hand, Liam's plan, week 1. He divided it into 3 columns, school, home and heart. Liam frowned. Heart? It's the part about learning to put yourself in someone else's shoes, he explained. Like when you lost your breath, and everyone else was terrified. That's empathy. After coffee, they sat at the table with books and notebooks. Maria produced a kitchen clock. 25 minutes of focus, 5 of rest. That's your pace now. Liam grumbled at a page of fractions. I hate this. Maria took a piece of bread and cut it in half, then in 4. See, eating is math too. Half, a quarter. Simple. Liam laughed. Okay. And that was cool. Richard watched from the living room, arms crossed, but there was hidden pride in his eyes. Grace bit her lip to keep from smiling widely. Later, Maria called Liam into the kitchen. The chef stopped in surprise when he saw the boy enter. Mr. Liam, I came to thank you for yesterday's pasta, and sorry about the paper balls I left on the floor. I'm not much help. The chef blinked, moved. Help now. Would you like to stir the sauce? Liam picked up the spoon as if it was serious. Maria bent down next to him. That's it, Liam. Respect is looking someone in the eye and acknowledging their effort. After lunch, they went to the reception. Liam looked at the security guard and said, Thanks for watching our door every day. The man smiled broadly. You can count on me, champ. That afternoon, Maria showed a simple trick for dealing with anxiety. Breathe in 4 counts. Inhale, hold, release slowly and hold again. Imagine you're drawing a square in the air. For what? Liam asked. To remind yourself that your head controls your fear. If you get stuck on a test, breathe like this and the answer will appear. He tried, laughed the first time, but then closed his eyes and succeeded. His chest rose and fell calmly. Maria clapped her hands softly. See? You're stronger than you think. As the days passed, the boy began to change. Teachers noticed more attention in class. Staff members began receiving good mornings and thank yous they'd never heard before. Even Grace was surprised one night when she found her son tidying his room. Who taught that? She asked. Maria said that discipline starts at home. Grace looked at the boy, then at Maria, who just smiled discreetly. Inside her, there was a pride that didn't fit the blue uniform. Days later, a new event brought together politicians, investors, and employees. But the atmosphere was nothing like the chaotic dinner of weeks before. There was more simplicity, more light-heartedness. In a corner, children giggled around a first aid dummy, and Maria, out of her maid's uniform, patiently demonstrated how to act in an emergency. Liam watched her closely, copying her every gesture. It was in this atmosphere that the provocation arose. One of the guests, adjusting his jacket, whispered loudly enough to be heard, Richard is exaggerating, trusting so much in just one maid. This is not serious. The comment spread like wildfire. Some smirked, others looked away. Richard, who was standing next to Maria, took a deep breath. Then he turned to face the man. Silence fell heavily. She saved what I hold most dear. His voice echoed firmly. If that's not a qualification, Nothing is. The room froze. The guest, unresponsive, took a step back. Grace clasped her hands in emotion, and Liam lifted his chin proudly. Slowly, a quiet round of applause began, first from the employees, then from the firefighters present, and finally from some investors. The applause grew like a wave, filling the room with respect. Maria, embarrassed, tried to retreat, but Richard wouldn't let her. He placed his hand on her shoulder and led her to the stage. The microphone was there, waiting. She took a deep breath, her heart racing, but found courage in Liam's eyes. "I'm not a heroine," she said simply. "I just turned my pain into learning. And if I can teach you anything today, it's that anyone can save a life. They just need to be willing to learn." A new silence fell, not of judgment, but of listening. The same room that had previously ignored her was now hanging on her every word. Maria handed the microphone back to Richard, but the message had already been received. Richard looked at her with a respect that would never be lost. From today on, everyone here will have access to the same knowledge she sought, because saving lives isn't a matter of social standing. It's a matter of humanity. The audience nodded, some excited, others embarrassed. But everyone, without exception, knew they were witnessing a milestone. The night an invisible maid became the most important person in the room. The triumph came not with gold, but with dignity. And in that growing applause, Maria ceased to be just part of the scenery. She became the example. Months later, the Miller mansion was no longer the same. The glow of the chandeliers was still there, but now it shared the space with something louder, the sound of laughter, hurried children's footsteps, and conversations that no longer needed to be whispered. In the garden, Liam chased a ball, his face flushed with health. Missing the kick, he turned to Maria, who was watching him with an exercise book in her hand. "I almost got it, didn't I?" "It's almost practice for getting it right, champ," she replied, smiling. "I have now come back, but don't forget to read later." Richard appeared right behind, suitless, in a simple shirt with rolled-up sleeves. He looked different, more relaxed, less concerned with looking perfect. He was coming from a special meeting, not with bankers, but with public school administrators. His new campaign, Seconds Save Lives, was being rolled out to dozens of New York City neighborhoods. "It's all set," he said proudly. "The program will begin in 10 schools next month." "Congratulations, Richard," Maria replied sincerely. "This will make a difference." "Not just my idea," he replied, pointing at her. "You're the one who lit that light." Grace, who had previously been obsessed with appearances, now approached without heavy makeup, her hair simply tied back. She carried a bouquet of freshly picked flowers from the garden. Seeing Maria, she stopped in front of her. Her teary eyes needed no rehearsal. "I'm not good with words," she said, her voice breaking, "but I have to say it. You gave us a second chance." She touched Maria's arm affectionately. "And I'll be grateful for the rest of my life." Maria took a deep breath, feeling the weight and lightness of that moment. Deep down, she remembered the son she had lost. But now, she saw that her grief had become a path for others. She was officially hired as the family's educator and personal assistant, but to them she was much more. She was an indispensable part of their home. As Liam ran across the lawn again, Maria closed her eyes for a moment. The wind carried the sound of applause from that night of the confrontation, now mixed with the free laughter of a child. It was the sound of life. Richard came closer and added, almost in a whisper, "You didn't just save my son. You saved us all." End of story.